Hello, class. This is the video for the week 14 content. So we're going to continue our discussion this week on leadership. Last week, we looked at a couple different types of leadership, a couple different styles. They were transactional and transformational. So transactional was really focused on extrinsic motivation, more focused on short-term goals, and motivating people through management by exception. Transformational was more concerned with a transformational or charismatic type leader that rallies the team, that inspires the team, that leads the team to focus on a shared goal. Now, both had their strengths, both had their weaknesses. But today we're going to go a little bit further as we look at leadership and strategic leadership specifically. So the question I'm going to ask to start out is, can leadership be harmful? Yes or no? If you answered yes, then ask yourself, when can it be harmful? Now, the truth is that everything we're going to run into in life has extremes. Extremes on the good, extremes on the bad side. But what we're looking for in most things is some sort of a balance, a well-balanced leadership style in particular that adds value to as many people as possible. So can leadership be harmful? Yes. And here's a list of a few things that might mark bad leadership behavior. Petty tyranny, abusive supervision, coercive power, social undermining, supervisory abuse, supervisory verbal abuse. So we can differentiate abuse between behavioral abuse and verbal abuse, unsupportive managerial behaviors, aversive leadership, destructive leadership, tyrannical leadership, and despotic leadership. So there's a lot of factors that can play in it, and this is just a short list. So what comes to mind when you think of toxic leadership? Now, if you were in class, you participated in the Menti exercise. I don't believe that it'll be up now if you're watching this video, so it may not do you any good to go there and try and enter anything in. But think of the 5 top things, the 5 top attributes that come to mind when you think of a toxic leader. Now, what I will do right now is I will share with you what one of the classes came up with. And here you can see several things, but the largest word, which means the thing that came out most, was ego. Well, we have dishonest, bad communication, arrogant. So all these things can contribute to bad leadership. Give me just a moment here. All right, so some leadership styles are considered harmful or destructive. Now, constructive leadership focuses on the accomplishment of the team and the organization's mission. So good strategic leadership will be mission focused. It'll be focused on the mission of the organization. It'll be focused on the goals of the organization and the desired outcomes. But destructive leadership is different. Destructive leadership is a systematic and consistent behavior of a leader that works against the organization's mission and vision and goals. So one easy way to identify bad leadership or destructive leadership is leadership that doesn't seem to be trying to go in the same direction with the same focus and vision as the rest of the organization. So now if we want to look at harmful leadership, if we want to be able to identify it, because you will encounter it, most likely you've already encountered it on some level, whether it's at college or perhaps in a work environment that you've been involved in. In order to know how to deal with it, we have to know how to identify it. So how do we understand what harmful leadership looks like? It can be understood best within the context, not of the individual and how an individual might respond to it, but better, how does it affect the entire team? Because one individual may have a personality conflict with the leader, and that's a personality conflict, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that leader's style of leadership is toxic or harmful. But if the entire team begins to suffer because of the leadership style of that leader, then that's a good indication that we're dealing with destructive, harmful, or toxic leadership. Destructive leadership can involve active acts of violence or aggression. So these are actions. Any act of violence, number one, needs to be reported right away to your supervisor or your supervisor's supervisor, or directly to HR if you can. But it can also be passive. So how that looks, or what that looks like, is withholding of vital information. If the leader's not transparent, if they're keeping information from you that you need to fully embrace the vision, the mission, or the organization, or that you need in order to do your job, that's a symptom of destructive leadership. Or if that leader fails to protect their team. If a leader throws their team under the bus, for example, if something goes wrong, and instead of the leader taking the blame and protecting the team, which the team itself may have fumbled somewhere, instead of protecting the team, they blame the team. That's not leadership. It's not healthy leadership. I would say it's not even leadership at all, but that is a good sign of destructive leadership. And it tells you that that leader is not providing a safe, psychologically safe working environment for their team. Now, looking at harmful leadership, we can actually divide harmful leadership into three separate categories. They are abusive leadership, bullying leadership, and toxic leadership. So these go in order of severity. So abusive is bad, but not as bad as bullying. Bullying is worse than abusive, but not as bad as toxic. And toxic is as bad as you can get. So let's talk first about abusive leadership. And it contains a variety of harmful behaviors. One of the results of an abusive leadership style is that it reduces the motivation and engagement of subordinates. So if you have an entire team that's disengaged, an entire team that really just doesn't care anymore, isn't giving their best work, not just one or two individuals, but the entire team, then that is probably a leadership problem. So what are some actions of abusive leaders? Maybe they ridicule their own people publicly. There's a good rule that many people follow that it'd be good for all of us to incorporate into our leadership vision. Praise publicly, correct privately. So if you have to correct someone, it should never be done in the presence of the whole team. So abusive leaders are characterized by actions that include public ridicule, favoritism, coercion, and punishment that's not dependent upon performance. And perhaps one of the most destructive behaviors of abusive leaders is when their actions don't align with their words. So they say something, but their behavior is completely different from what they say they believe or they want, or the direction they want to go. Abusive leaders take credit for other people's work. and they're often condescending and very impersonal, as well as arrogant and boastful. Rigid and inflexible in their leadership, their behavior can be harmful to an organization and result in organizational injustice and the perception of employees that the organization has breached the psychological contract. So a little bit on that. So if you work for another company, there is a psychological contract that's implied as part of your performance, as part of your employment, and that is that the employer is providing you a safe place to work, to get your job done, reasonably safe. Everything has some risk with it, but psychological contract says that there's a reasonable amount of safety for you to get your work done and to be rewarded according to your hard work and to collect your salary. Next, let's look at bullying leadership. How does bullying leadership manifest itself? 4 areas here. It can be harassing, it can be offensive, it can socially exclude a subordinate or negatively affect other employees' work tasks. So for behavior to be identified as bullying, it must occur consistently over a period of time. And we're talking 6 months or more. The target of bullying generally feels defenseless to protect themselves from one or more persons' harmful actions, which means it's not just that someone does something that maybe they do something offensive, or they're under pressure and they do something you don't really like, and you stand up and defend yourself and you work it out. Then you're not being bullied. But if you're feeling defenseless, it's that you can't protect yourself against this bully, this leader, and it's taking place over 6 months time or more, then there's a good likelihood that you've been exposed to bullying leadership. But it's important to remember that not all behavior that might be classified as bullying is harmful when it's targeted towards improving team performance. And while we don't see these being used much anymore, a couple examples are a boot camp style team building event. So you go off site, you do a lot of physical activity. There's a lot of very demanding drill instructor type leaders taking you through this. It was designed to build teams. It wasn't very effective, so it's not really done that much anymore. And when it was done, it was usually done for executive level individuals. Or sometimes they did military type training exercises, which hopefully they aren't doing anymore either, but those are some examples. A little more about this. So bullying in leadership manifests itself as harassing, offending, socially excluding a subordinate, or negatively affecting others' work tasks. And we've covered all of this before in the previous slide. All right, so now we're going to get to toxic leadership. And I'm going to show you an image of a toxic triangle. Toxic leadership is much more comprehensive. It's a more comprehensive area of harmful leadership and may encompass many abusive and bullying elements. But toxic leadership is much more harmful in its effects, and its effects last a lot longer than the other 2 styles of harmful leadership. Characteristics of toxic leadership include serious and enduring harm inflicted by the leader's destructive behavior and dysfunctional personalities. And the effects are often experienced past the individual level. They usually affect the entire organization. Now, research has shown that not all toxic leadership is ineffective. Some consistent qualities of toxic leadership have been identified that contribute toward harmful outcomes, and these are self-promotion, abusive supervision, unpredictability, narcissism, and authoritarian leadership. Now, of these qualities, unpredictability and abusive supervision have the greatest power to produce negative outcomes. And it's also important to note that while harmful leaders should receive the same benefit of development efforts and learning and retraining efforts of the organization, if they don't take to it, if they don't change, the organization needs to terminate their employment as fast as possible. If you're in an organization that continues to employ them, even though they have a toxic leadership style, that they've tried to address it and retrain it and deal with it, but if it doesn't improve and they still keep that leader, then that may be the type of organization you want to walk away from. I want you to think now, as we ask a question and wrap up our talk on toxic leadership, have you ever experienced any of those attributes in a leader? So your next question may be, and would be natural, how do you respond to harmful leadership? Well, I want to take a minute and watch a video from Simon Sinek and see what he says.
So we get a lot of questions about from people who work in toxic leadership environments, and they ask, what are they to do? How do they be the leader they wish they had? Well, being the leader you wish you had means you commit yourself to the care and success of those around you. Remember, leadership has nothing to do with rank. I know many people who sit at the highest levels of organizations who are not leaders. They have authority, which is why we do as they tell us, but we would not follow them. Leadership can happen at any rank. The choice you have to make is, do you want to be the leader? Now, leadership comes with risks. If you speak truth to power, you could get in trouble. If you're the one who stands in between the powers that be and the people you work with, if you're going to commit yourself to work late sometimes to help people and make those sacrifices, you're going to have to take those risks. That's why not everyone wants to be a leader, because it does come with real sacrifice and real risk. But if you want to be that person, if you want to be the leader you wish you had, you look to your left, you look to your right, and you say, how can I help them succeed? Number one, if you see somebody on your team struggling, ask them if they're okay, ask them if you can help. If you know that somebody doesn't know how to do something, sit down and show them. Ask them if you want them to double check your work. Remember, a big way in which we build trust is not actually by offering for help, but also asking for help. So one of the things you can do by being a leader is also asking those around you to help. Let them feel like they're empowered to help those around them. And in the course of time, you will build a level of trust on your team that they will see you as the person who has their back. And you get used to it. It's a practice like any other skills. You want to ride a bicycle, you have to practice. You get good at it. Leadership is the same. Get in the habit of considering the lives of others. Someone's running for the elevator, the doors are closing, you're running late for a meeting. Instead of just letting the doors close, hold the door open for somebody. If you're the last person to pour yourself a cup of coffee at the office, instead of putting the empty pot back, make another pot of coffee. It's little things where you consider those around you, the lives of others, sometimes ahead of yourself, and be willing to sacrifice time and energy to help those around you.
So that's some great advice right there. So leadership, as he's describing it, is as much about being courteous and caring about other people as anything. And that is a very important part of strategic leadership. It's not just being the person in charge. It's about how do you add value to the people who you have been given responsibility over. And as Simon said, you don't have to have an official leadership position to begin behaving like a leader, someone who cares about others and someone who can add value to other people's lives. Now, let's look at 7 things that you can do if you're faced with a toxic leadership situation. How do you deal with it? What can you do? How can you move forward? Number one, make the decision to stay or go. You're going to have to decide if you're going to continue to work in that environment or not. Now, if you don't have any other options, then you're going to have to learn how to exist in that environment until you can find another job, another employer, or another opportunity. Maybe you go into business for yourself. But if you don't have that option B, you're going to have to stay. If you have an option B, then you can make this choice. Decide to stay or decide to go. If you decide to stay, you need to do the work. Don't make yourself a target. Do the work you're given to do. Do it the best you can. Do it in a way that the leader wants it done. Sometimes that's not easy to figure out if you're doing it the way the leader wants it done, but do that to the best of your ability. Do not get drawn in. So do not get drawn into the drama of a toxic leader. Keep your distance from it. Interact with them only as you have to. Keep it to a minimum. Get your work done and move on. Don't gossip. So even though it may be tempting during, say, break time or lunchtime or off time, and you're with other coworkers, don't start gossiping with them about that toxic leader. That's not going to help you. It's not going to help them, and it's not going to solve the situation. And if someone overhears you, it could backfire on you big time. Keep detailed records. So any interaction with the leader, you need to keep a little journal. Don't keep it on your work computer. Keep it on your personal computer, your phone, your personal tablet, or write it down pen and ink style, but keep detailed records of what happened, what was said, what was asked, what you were told to do. Keep as many details as you can about it and keep that written record. You may need it later. Don't derail your career. So don't sabotage your own career just because you can't handle working with this toxic leader. Make sure your decisions are done rationally. Make sure they're done calmly. Make sure that you're making the best decisions that are going to keep your career on track. And remember, it's not forever. Even the worst situation in the workplace is only temporary. Keep that in mind. It'll give you great perspective. Okay, so now I want to share one more video with you. This is from a psychologist named Jordan Peterson. And should you quit your job? You can't bargain. If you can't bargain, you're a slave. So let's take a look at what he has to say.
What do you say to those viewers that don't pursue their dreams and are locked in their careers because they are too afraid to take risks and pursue something meaningful?
Well, the first thing I would say is, well, you should be afraid of taking risks and pursuing something meaningful. But you should be more afraid of staying where you are if it's making you miserable. It's like the first thing you want to do is dispense with the idea that you get to have any permanent security outside of your ability to contend and adapt. It's the same issue with children. It's like you're paying a price by sitting there being miserable. And you might say, well, the devil I know is better than the one I don't. It's like, don't be so sure of that. The clock is ticking.
Yeah,
And if you're miserable in your job now and you change nothing, in 5 years you'll be much more miserable and you'll be a lot older.
But isn't it a luxury to pursue what is meaningful? Our viewers have mortgages, they have children,
Yeah.
they have payments and loans. It's
Well,
a luxury to pursue because we lack the resources.
Well, I don't remember now, I'm not talking about what makes you happy. It's a luxury to pursue what makes you happy. It's a moral obligation to pursue what you find meaningful. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It might require sacrifice. If you need to change your job too, let's say you have a family and children and a mortgage, you have responsibilities. You've already picked up those responsibilities. You don't just get to walk away scot-free and say, well, I don't like my job, I quit. That's no strategy. But what you might have to do is you think, well, this job is killing my soul. All right, so what do I have to do about that? Well, I have to look for another job. Well, no one wants to hire me. It's like, okay, maybe you need to educate yourself more. Maybe you need to update your curriculum vitae, your resume. Maybe you need to overcome your fear of being interviewed. Maybe you need to sharpen your social skills. Like, you have to think about these things strategically. If you're going to switch careers, you have to do it like an intelligent, responsible person. That might take you a couple of years of effort to do properly.
When you say pursue something meaningful, is it important to have a vocation?
I think it's more important to have an ethos, an ethic. The first thing that you want to do is figure out, imagine you were taking care of yourself, like you were someone you cared for. Then you should figure out, well, if you could have what you needed and wanted, what would it be? What sort of friends would you have? What would your family relationships look like? How would you conduct yourself with your children? How would you educate yourself? You need to think through how it is that your life could be properly arranged if you had that ability. And then you can aim at that. And the funny thing is that if you do posit a goal of that sort and work towards it, you will move towards it. The goal will change because you'll learn things along the way. But I mean, I've dealt with hundreds of people in my clinical and consulting practice, and we set a goal, we develop a vision and work towards it, and things inevitably get better for people. So it's not a luxury, it's difficult. It's a moral responsibility, and it isn't happiness. It's not, the pursuit isn't for happiness.
And that might be the best thing that ever happened to you, because if the structure you're in is going in that direction and you can't stop it, it's like, get the hell out of there and find something else. So it's not that hard to find a job when you already have a job. That's another thing to keep in mind too. You know, whenever you're working, and you will be, especially in the world of today where jobs are relatively uncertain, you should always have an escape route planned, and it should be active, because if you don't have an escape route and you can't get away, you can't say no. And if you can't say no, you can't bargain, and if you can't bargain, you're a slave. So that's how the world is set out at the moment. It's probably always been like that, but it's something that you really need to know, because you got to watch. If your being is objecting to something that someone is forcing you to do, maybe you're right. Maybe you shouldn't be doing it. And lots of people end up living meaningless lives. And that's not a very good term, because there's no such thing as a meaningless life. Because one of the meanings of life is suffering. And there's no bloody way you're going to escape that. So you will not have a meaningless life. You'll have a life that's only suffering. And I wouldn't recommend that.
All right. So that's kind of heavy there, but it's some good advice. It's something to consider. I will post this PowerPoint, so you'll be able to access those videos anytime. They're also both on YouTube. But now, as we go through the rest of today's class, we're about two-thirds of the way through it. I want to talk about something on a little bit more positive note. Another style of leadership, which is called the role model leader. And this was developed through the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which you can find it at nist.gov. So this style of leadership came out of something called the Baldrige Excellence Framework. And there's the link there. Now, this is a systems way of looking at an organization. It's a systems approach. And so when I say a systems approach, what I'm talking about is that instead of saying, look at marketing, or looking at operations, or looking at the manufacturing arm, or looking at the finance arm, we take every single part of the organization, every silo, as it's called, and we consider all of it as a whole. So accounting is a system, marketing is a system, operations is a system, manufacturing is a system, human resources is a system. And we want to look at all of them together and how they work together or not in the operation of the whole organization. So it would be like taking a look at an individual, a person, and taking a look at you. If your doctor is taking a look at you, they're not going to look at, say, just your nervous system and ignore every other part of your body and say, you're just a nervous system. That's all you are. No, you're a nervous system. You're a digestive system. You're a skeletal system. You have other organs. You have skin. You have hair. There's all these different systems within our bodies that make up the totality of who we are physically. And then we have our mind and our soul, which makes up the psychological portion of us. And you have to combine the physical with the psychological and the spiritual to get a whole person. So in the same way, we're looking at a whole organization. Now this diagram here, this is the diagram that illustrates fairly well the whole system approach to leadership. So you can see in the middle. You can see here, it starts with the systems perspective. And then you have your core values, valuing people, customer-focused excellence, finding the value and result. We're going to look at all of these things. So these are the core values. We have a systems perspective. The core values are outside of our systems perspective, but they're going to drive everything else. They're embedded in a systematic process of these 6 criteria. And together, the systems perspective, the core values, the systematic processes reveal or produce our performance results, workforce results, customer, financial, market and strategy results, leadership and governance results, and product and process results. So this is the Baldrige Excellence Framework. It is the systems approach to managing an organization. It works. It's been proven over many years. In fact, organizations that use this tend to produce about a 25% increase in their financial results when they use this approach. All right, so now let's look at these different things. What is a systems perspective? It simply means that you're managing all the parts of your organization as a unified whole. If you're a top-level strategic leader, a systems perspective means that you're going to manage all the parts of your organization, every department, as a unified whole to achieve your mission and strive towards your vision. That visionary leadership, it means your organization's senior leaders should set a vision for the organization. They could create a customer focus, demonstrate clear and visible organizational values and ethics, and set high expectations for the workforce. All right, let's look at some of the core competencies that make up the role model leader. First, we'll focus on the customer-focused excellence. Now, depending on the organization, this could be the patient-focused excellence or the student-focused excellence. And your customers are the ultimate judges of your performance and of product and service quality. So your organization has to consider all product and service characteristics and modes of customer access and support that contribute to your customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, positive referrals, and ultimately your organization's ongoing success. The next thing we'll look at is valuing people. So a successful organization values its workforce members and the other people who have a stake in the organization, including customers, community members, suppliers and partners, and other people affected by its actions. Next, we have agility and resilience. Now, agility requires a capacity for rapid change and for flexibility in operations. Organizational resilience is the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and recover from disasters, emergencies, and other disruptions. And when disruptions occur, to protect and enhance workforce and customer engagement, supply network, and financial performance, organizational productivity, and community well-being. So agility and resilience encompasses all these items and being able to handle the ups and the downs of the business. More importantly, the downs, the unseen emergencies that might happen, the COVID pandemic that might happen, and being able to rebound from it and keep everything working together as a cohesive whole. Next, we have organizational learning. Now, organizational learning includes both continuous improvement of existing approaches and significant change or innovation, leading new goals, approaches, products, and markets. So organizational learning is the learning of the organization as a whole. So it involves the individual learning of each employee, but how that works together as the learning of the organization to continually improve, to continually change and innovate, to continue to lead towards those new goals. Then we have a focus on success and innovation. Ensuring your organization's success now and in the future requires understanding the short and longer term factors that affect your organization and its environment. It also requires the ability to drive organizational innovation. Now, innovation means making meaningful change to improve your products, services, programs, processes, operations, and business model with the purpose of creating new value for stakeholders. So think of innovation as anything that creates new value for your stakeholders. It's not just developing a new product necessarily or a new service, but creating new levels of value or maybe just new kinds of value for your customers. We have management by fact. Now, management by fact requires you to measure and analyze your organization's performance, both inside the organization and in your competitive environment. Those are both things that we've done through this class. Analysis of performance measures and indicators should support organizational evaluation, alignment, and decision-making. Next, we have societal contributions. So your organization's leaders should stress contributions to the public and the consideration of societal well-being and benefit. So your leaders should be role models for the well-being of your communities. Now, the community can vary from organization to organization. You'll have local communities for where if you have a physical location or maybe your business is just based, say, in Phoenix, then your community is Phoenix. And how are you bettering your community? But if you're a large multinational corporation, your community ultimately is the world, and you're still going to deal with local communities and statewide communities and national communities, but then you also have the world community that you have to consider. And how are you making the well-being of the world community better through your operations? This brings us to ethics and transparency. Your organization should stress ethical behavior by all workforce members in all stakeholder transactions. Senior leaders should be role models of ethical behavior, including transparency. It should be characterized by candid and open communication on the part of leadership and management, and by the sharing of accurate information. One thing to remember is that you can never over-communicate as a leader. Just communicate and re-communicate, because the more you put it out there in front of people, the more it becomes a part of the culture and the ethos. Next, we want to talk about delivering value and results, and this is our last one. Your organization should choose and analyze results that help you deliver and balance value for your key stakeholders. The results need to include not just financial results, but also product and process results, customer and workforce satisfaction and engagement, and leadership strategy and societal performance. So those are the core concepts of the role model leader. It's just one more model of leadership for you to consider. And as you go through life and through your careers, you'll find a model of leadership that fits you, that fits your personality, and more important, fits the needs of your organization and your team. There's a lot of models out there. I just wanted to give you a handful. So that's it for week 14. Next week will be our last week in class, and I haven't quite decided how I'm gonna run next week, but looking forward to seeing you all. Hope you all can join me online and that we can wrap this up in a good, positive way. Remember to watch the week 15 deliverables video that I uploaded. Get those assignments in, get them in by next Sunday so you get the highest possible grade. That's it. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.